How affordable really is the housing market in Canada, especially for the newcomers? Now let's take a look at the numbers, shall we? The average price of a one-bedroom home in Canada hovers around $500,000. Yes, you heard that right, $500,000. For a two-bedroom home, you're looking at a whopping $700,000, and for a three-bedroom home, prepare yourselves because it's a staggering $1 million on average. And if we narrow our focus to major cities like Vancouver and Toronto, these figures become even more daunting. Vancouver's average home price currently sits at a shocking $2.2 million, while Toronto's average home price is a startling $1.5 million. Now let's juxtapose these numbers with the average salaries for immigrants in Canada. A newcomer, even one with a professional degree, can expect to earn around $50,000 a year. That's right, $50,000. You may compare these earning prospects to those from your country and think, awesome, $50,000's great, but let's do the math here. If immigrants save every penny they earn, it would take them 10 years to afford a one-bedroom home. And that's without considering the interest rates, property taxes, and living expenses. But let's be real. It's impossible to save every single penny. So what does this mean? It means that the dream of owning a home becomes a distant reality for most immigrants in Canada. It means long hours, multiple jobs, and the constant struggle to make ends meet, all for the chance to secure a piece of the Canadian dream. A new report showed that Canada's homeless population is of about 250,000 people. Let that sink in for a moment. 250,000 people in Canada are homeless, and around 15% of those are newcomers. That is about 37,000 immigrants without a home. But this isn't just about numbers and statistics. This is about real people, real families who come to Canada in search of a better life. They come with dreams of owning a home, of providing a safe and secure environment for their families. But the reality of the Canadian housing market often shatters these dreams. In the face of such high housing costs, the question remains, how do immigrants manage? And more importantly, what can be done to make the Canadian housing market more accessible to all? Because at the end of the day, a home is more than just a structure of bricks and mortar. It's a symbol of stability, of security, and of belonging. And that's something everyone, newcomer or not, deserves to have. Are the yearly immigration targets set by the federal government sustainable in light of the housing crisis? This is a question that many are asking. The Canadian government has set ambitious immigration targets, welcoming a large influx of newcomers each year. This, in theory, enriches the cultural mosaic of the nation, but it also has a significant downside. It dramatically increases the demand for housing, further straining an already overburdened market. The stark reality is that about 30% of these immigrants leave within 2 years. The reasons are multifaceted, but the unaffordable housing market is a significant factor. The dream of owning a home or even renting a comfortable apartment becomes a nightmare of endless work hours, financial stress, and the crushing disappointment of unmet expectations only to end up renting someone's basement. That's right! Many immigrants can't even afford to rent an apartment, so they rent someone's basement, and sometimes not even that. Sometimes all they can afford is a single room inside a basement or an apartment. With such a grim outlook, the dreams of many newcomers are being crushed. The question remains, can Canada find a sustainable balance between its immigration ambitions and the realities of its housing market? So far, the Canadian government has not been able to balance the two. Politicians keep blaming each other, and nobody wants to take responsibility for the deplorable state of housing in Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau himself promised to make housing a priority before the last elections, but recently said that housing isn't a primary federal responsibility. Shortly after, the housing minister blamed the issue on the large number of international students coming into Canada every year, and proposed a cap on said number, while the immigration minister deflected and blamed other factors for the housing crisis. All the while, an international student was recently found sleeping under a bridge in Toronto. The promise of peace, order, and good government that constitutes Canada's approach to statecraft is one governments keep falling short on, as per evidenced by the current housing crisis. Is the Canadian real estate market being used for nefarious activities that exacerbate the housing crisis? A question that may seem outlandish to some, but the reality is far darker than many would like to admit. While the unaffordable housing prices and the vast influx of immigrants are serious issues, there's another significant factor contributing to the dire state of the Canadian real estate market: money laundering. Yes, you heard it right, money laundering. The Canadian real estate market has become a playground for international entities, especially those from China, to clean their ill-gotten gains. These corporations and individuals invest in Canadian properties, inflating prices, and making it even more difficult for the average immigrant to afford a basic home. But why is this happening, you may ask? The answer lies with the Canadian government. They have the power to act, the power to dismantle these networks of white-collar crime that are wreaking havoc in the real estate market. But for some reason, they choose not to. Could it be that the government benefits from this situation? It's plausible. After all, the taxation of purchased properties, whether bought with clean or dirty money, increases the government's revenue. Some might argue this is a cynical view, but when we look at the few networks that have been dismantled, it's merely a drop in an ocean of criminal networks that continue to operate freely. So what we have is a real estate market that's not only inflated by an unsustainable immigration policy, but also plagued by international money laundering, and mismanaged by a government that is too unwilling or too incompetent to fix it. This leaves immigrants, many of whom are professionals with multiple degrees, working endless hours, struggling to provide a comfortable life for their families. This is the darker side of the Canadian real estate market, a side that we cannot afford to ignore any longer. The Canadian dream, it seems, is becoming increasingly elusive for those who were promised a land of opportunity. And as long as the government continues its inaction, the situation will only worsen. Whether by omission or deliberation, the Canadian government's inaction leaves many immigrants working endless hours, struggling to afford the comfortable life they were promised. The housing market in Canada is broken, that is a reality. But beyond that, what's truly broken is the promise. The promise that Canada is a land of opportunity where professionals can thrive. Follow us for more content. We will be unveiling more of the deeper truths about Canada that are rarely brought to light in hopes that it can help you weigh your pros and cons to better inform your decision.